Hey, Iburu, Iboya, Ibucheche, everybody in Cyberland. Your fair Bawalao, at least I hope so. Omo Odu Oddi Leke coming at you with another great video. And this one, particularly, is going to be one that is going to cover and highlight part of your favorite Babalao Institute. We're currently on session 3. We're finishing up the lesson, right? 4 sessions per unit. This is the last session for this unit on issue, right? And I thought this was super beneficial for not just the folks that are actually taking the classes, but I thought it was important to share some of the things that I'm going to say today because they're going to hit home on a lot of different perspectives, a lot of different things, and why not share? So, with that said, and without further ado, we're going to jump right in. So, for my guys that are currently in the class, I apologize. I didn't give you your student handout. So I'm gonna put that in the chat now so we can get that out the way. And that way you have it. So let me chat. Let me dump that in there. Student handout and boom shakalaka. All right, you guys should now have the student handout inside. Now we can begin this session. So long story short, hey, we've come a long way, right? So let's start by grounding ourselves, right? Let's start by kind of understanding, where we're gonna go and where we're gonna try to travel through as we begin to better understand issue. But now that we've already kind of covered, right, in unit 1, 2, and 3, we covered a lot of data. Right? We covered a lot of the concepts of ASU when we started talking about the core functions of ASU. We started talking about the ethics through the Odus of Ifá. We started talking about the misconceptions and the corrective nature of where ASU sits in the pantheon of things, right? So we went through a lot, right? I want to make sure that at the end of the day, you guys have a firm understanding on what exactly and where we're at, so that way there's no confusion. All right, let me just hit one thing here. Okay, so without further ado, let's jump right in and let's begin this because today we're going to cover quite a few things. This is going to be a pretty lengthy one, okay? So we're going to start our journey with just understanding that ultimately at the end of the day, we will discuss the ethics. We will discuss the protocols. We will discuss the elements of issue and kind of their symbols of power. Because a lot of people don't understand that an issue is more than just, okay, we have a consecrated item, but to consecrate that item comes a lot of work. To maintain that item causes a lot of work. And a lot of times there's a lot of things that go with that. Then we're gonna recap unit 3A through C so that way we have a fresh idea based on everything we learned. Now we did our recap, and now we can better understand. And this is kind of like your capstone lesson for those who in higher academia, as you guys understand what the capstone is. This is kind of the capstone of issue, right? I wish we can talk about issue and there's tons of things that we can talk about, but you will now leave with a firm understanding of issue. Okay, so let's begin, right? Let's better understand issue and let's better understand where we're going with issue when it comes to a lot of different concepts. So when we talk about issue, now when we talk about issue, some of the things that I always want to begin with is, you know, issue is called kind of like the policeman. Think about the policeman of the universe, right? He's not chaos, right? And we kind of went over that in last unit where a lot of people began to label, we began to label issue at a certain point as, he's evil, he's a demon, he's the devil, this, that, and the other, right? And Christianity started to put a really bad rap on him. And we didn't do ourselves any favor either, because then we always constantly calling him a trickster. We constantly, always saying, hey, be weary. But being weary, okay, it's like a person that does nothing, right? And is driving in the highway and the police drives behind them and they get nervous, right? And you don't know why you get nervous. Sometimes we just get nervous because we're like, damn, they're gonna stop me, they're gonna give me a ticket, is everything okay? And that's the unnerving concept and the unnerving nature of issue. Right? He's correctness. He's not everything we really truly make him out to be. And we're gonna begin to establish that because the ethics of working with issue now that we dug into issue the last 3 units, now that we kind of have some firm understandings on issue, now we're gonna dig in that, his purpose is to ensure that the consequences follow the choices made and that the balance is never abandoned because everything in Ifa and in Yoruba cosmology comes from balance. Okay, and that's going to be important for us to always remember. Okay, in addition, in addition, bum, bum, bum. Okay, in addition, when we start to kind of better explore this, right, we had to understand that we're exploring this through four lenses, right? The ethics, the morals, the legality, the psychology, right? And the medicine, right? Because psychology and medicine are kind of the same thing for those of us that have been in Ifa long enough. And for those people who are Bawalaos, you always notice that in one way, shape, or form, an Osobo can be followed by Cafeteleri. And we start to understand that sometimes we psych ourselves and we create our own Osobos. Right. And then, of course, he files also medicine. And we do medicine all the time, whether I'm cleaning you with something, whether I'm giving you something to drink, whether I'm telling you to hold something, right? But first, to truly understand issue, right? To fully understand the concept of issue and the greatness of issue, right? And where I'm trying to get to with this lesson per se, okay? Right? When we talk about the ethics of working with issue, I want to kind of go over a couple of patakís. And the first pataki that I really want to kind of hit on is one that comes from Oyekun Obbe, right? The man who refused sacrifice, right? And when I talk about this pataki, matter of fact, let's just dive right in. Let's just dive right in. All right. A man consulted Orunmila because his life was in ruins. Things wasn't necessarily flowing the way it was supposed to. And Orunmila does what Orunmila does. People come to him, right? And I wish people would come to Bawalaos a little bit more often than not to maybe get a checkup. But they typically come when there's problems. So Orunmila sees this person and sees this person with an Odu, right? That's called Oyekun Obbe. Okay. And then Oyekun Obbe appeared, right? And Ifa or Orunmila said that, hey, Ifa says you got to offer a sacrifice to Eshu with certain ingredients. Particular in here, there was certain ingredients in a goat. And if you do this, Orunmila told him, your paths are gonna open. So the man refused. Right? He said, why should I give to Eshu? He's only a trickster. What did I tell you about this stigma, right? About we label, and we got to be careful with that. He's only a trickster. I will keep my goat, right? And guess what? Eshu heard the insult. And soon, right, the man's farm started to fail, right? And little by little, his animals died out. His friends started to abandon him. And he started to kind of see that those assistants in that community that he had was starting to kind of just pull away from him. So he returned to Orunmila and told him, hey, what is going on? I don't understand. And Orunmila reminded him, hey, you disrespected Eshu. You thought your actions had no consequences. And Eshu is always going to enforce balance. So this time, the man obeyed. He gave the proper sacrifice, right, with humility, right? And his life was restored. Right. So then when we look at this particular pataki, we got to kind of see what is the lesson, what is the moral, ethical lesson here. And we begin to see that Eshu rewards obedience and honesty, right? He punishes arrogance and neglect. And he's going to ensure at the end of it all that no broken contract goes unnoticed. And we got to remember that. And we got to remember that. So because of how I got everything set up here, I got to make sure I put YouTube on this side over here so everybody on YouTube world can see. Okay. So now let's continue, shall we? Let's continue. Okay. So now we go into Ogunda Bede, right? And when we go into Ogunda Bede, kind of begins to explain to us the truth and the lies before issue. And Ogunda Bede, is an Odu that, this particular pataki, I want you to understand that in the Yoruba cosmology of things, a lot of different things had spirits. A lot of different things were animated. A lot of different things were still coming together as Olodumare was creating the universe and Aye was created and the Orishas and the Irumoles came down and the Orishas began to morph. Things had personalities. Things had to come together. So in this particular pataki, truth and lies, right, are actual characters. So this is how this pataki begins. So truth and lies got into an argument, right, on who was greater, right? And lies started to booster himself, started pounding himself on the chest, saying, I am lies. Everyone uses me to succeed. Truth replied, but without me, the world cannot stand. So obviously, lies is going to come back and lies is going to go back and forth with truth, right? And lies is like, well, everyone lies. Everyone's going to say a little white lie. Everyone is going to say something in order to make themselves be a little bit more promotable, marketable, maybe. Everyone will do it. So I will be involved with the maturity of humanity. All right. So they went to Orunmila because truth and lies in this argument, they wanted to understand, right? What was the truth? So Orunmila cast it and came out with the Odun of Ogunda Bede or Ogunda Obe, right? And said only Eshu can judge this matter between truth and lies. Right? So then, guess what? They went to Eshu. And when they went to issue, I want you to kind of think about this. Put yourself in the minds of someone who would be that habitual liar or that manipulator, right? So lie, right, presented himself all polished up with words and gifts, looking good, right? Eshu accepted the gifts, but he remained silent, right? Then truth came forward. Truth came naked, unadorned, right? And he said, well, I have only myself. Because without me, every oath and every sacrifice collapses. I want you guys to resonate on that for a minute. So then Eshu rose, and he declared that without truth, nothing stands. Lies may prosper for maybe a season, but I will always expose them, Eshu says. Whoever honors truth will prosper. Whoever clings to lies will fall. Those were the words expressed through Eshu in the Odun of Ogunda Bede or Ogunda Obe. Right, so I want you all to kind of have an idea here, of what does that truly represent? Does this represent this evil, negative thing? No. It's showing us that Eshu exposes deception. He upholds truth. He enforces fairness. Eshu has a bad rap, and I want to ensure that we have this understood, right? So, since we're on pataki mode, we got another pataki here that I want to make sure that ultimately, at the end of the day, you guys are getting and making sure I don't have any questions, comments, and concerns so far. But okay, now When we talk about Pataki 3, there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that we understand. All right? So we are talking about times way long before, right, the days or the later dawns of humanity. So in this Pataki, we talk about the Odungo and Osatura. We talk about Eshu and the broken promise, right? And a lot of times in this particular Pataki, in the ancient times, right, a wealthy man promised Orunmila, right, that he will prosper and he will give thanks with sacrifice. Orunmila divined for this man and instructed him, listen, I hear you, right? But Eshu's gonna test you. Whatever you do, do not break your word. Right? Remember, the wealthy man promised Orunmila that if he prospered, he will give thanks with sacrifice. So the man became wealthy, but he forgot his promise, right? He built his houses. And in this story, it does talk about how he had, servants and whatnot. He enjoyed the riches and the nice things of life, but he gave nothing in return. So Eshu appeared one night, disguised as a beggar, asking for food, and the man mocked him. Why should I share with you? I earned this myself, he told the beggar. So Eshu listened, and Eshu does what Eshu does, right? Eshu left silently. Days later, thieves raided this man's house, right? His servants abandoned him. His wealth vanished, right? And he was desperate. So he returned to Orunmila, who said and reminded him, hey, you prospered through sacrifice. You prospered through sacrifice, but you broke your promise. Eshu is the enforcer of the words. What you speak binds you. Only after the man kind of repented and sacrificed, did balance return and things started to get better for this man. So then what is Eshu trying to tell us here? What is the story trying to tell us? And this is the illustration that, as we begin our studies and we go deeper into this, Satura, Eshu teaches that, words are contracts, right? And to break them invites downfall, right? And we need to be understanding of that. We need to understand what that means. So, any questions, comments, concerns on these patakis at all before I jump into some of these other bullet points that I want to chat about before we get to the next section, because we got a few sections and we got a lot of material to cover here. Anything from my Zoom people? People. Gimme. Oh, we got a class. We got a quiet class today. That's okay.
Iburu boy Buchitelo.
Hey, Buruboya.
Blessings to all the brothers on the Zoom. Sending love to everybody. You know what's crazy? So about I would say last Saturday, I went to get a haircut, and I came out, and this gentleman came up on me and was like, "Hey, my friend, can I get a couple dollars? Can I get $1?" And I remember you saying that you should always keep a couple of dollars on you in case somebody needs something. So I've been trying to run with that. So I said, "Yeah, I got you," and I gave it to him. And when he walked away, I just looked at his walk, and I was like, something reminded me like Eshu for some reason. You know what I mean? And he just dipped off and like ran to McDonald's and he got something to eat. The first thing you think is, you could be a drug addict or somebody's gonna take the money to do that. Like so, I grew up with addicts. So my father used to ask me for $20 all the time. Can I get 20? I said, listen, I ain't giving you no money, but I'll take you to get some food. I'll buy you cigarettes, whatever, but I'm not giving you the money to go run. So I got over that after the years went by, but not to run on with it, but I just had the flashback saying like, wow, that he reminded me of Eshu when he walked off. I was like, and now that you say that, it felt like it was a test. You boy Buchiche.
Hey, Buruboya Bucheche. I'm truly glad. That's a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that. No, thank you for that because it kind of reinforces what we're talking about, right? a lot of times, again, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around issue. An issue at the end of it all is just trying to maintain this cosmic balance. But by maintaining that cosmic balance, and remember I used the phrase the policeman of the universe, right? We also kind of take a step back and we say, damn, you know what? Maybe I should keep $1 in my pocket. You know what I mean? And again, and for everybody, the conversation that Christian and I always had was, I always break a 20 and I always have dollars on me, right? I break a 20 into dollars and I keep them with me. And whenever I see somebody who may ask me for $1 or something, I don't mind giving $1. Think about how much money you spend right there. I want just by every dollar, right? $20 is not even $1 a day. But you go to Starbucks, you spend the $5. You know what I mean? You go to McDonald's, you spending $10. You go to, you know what I mean? And so guess what? I sacrifice those things, right? Just so I can keep $20 in single, so I can be able create kind of this ethical, moral, and kind of this community, right? That it's not just about me, but we're creating something that's a little bit more sacred, right? And this is all coming from the basis of understanding who Eshu is, right? And again, it's not necessarily a fear factor because if you don't have it, you don't have it. But if you have it, then why not try to give something just a little bit better? So, no, it's a beautiful thing. Thank you for sharing that. All right. Nobody else got nothing. We're going to jump right in. All right. Now, let's talk about the ethics, the universal balance of things, right? And I think that's important for us to always remember. When we talk about ethics, any Ifa, ethics is always kind of guided by this term that we use a lot. We always like to use the word iwapale. Iwapale, right? And Babalaos, we use it like as if we're going crazy. But it's a Yoruba term that talks about gentle character or good character. But at the end of the day, just having some form of character is important, right? But that character has to have that ethical and that moral concept to it, right? In order for it to truly come to fruition. So what Eshu is doing is challenging us to be great people, right? Because Eshu is the one that enforces that. Eshu now brings that universal balance back into play. So in Oyekun Obe, what happened? In Oyekun Obe and the Pataki, what happened? Right? That arrogance broke the balance, right? Humility restored it. So the man's arrogance did something. The humility came back. The balance was back in creation, right? And now life is better again, right? We can almost say the same thing about Osatura, right? Think about Osatura in the third Pataki, right? What did we see? We saw in the third Pataki that a broken promise led to destruction. This is the reason why in Lukumi, guess what we do? A lot of times, we do spiritual misas, we do itas, and we tell the person, oh yeah, hey, you gotta do X, Y, and Z, right? And in misas, they say, well, the Egun said X, Y, and Z, right? Or the spirit said X, Y, and Z, whatever, right? But you wanted to hear the divine word. You received the consultation. That priest, that priestess, right? Or spiritualist, at a certain point was giving you their ache. They were taking their gifts and they were initiating and putting it into the universe to bring some form of reaction and reality to your life. And whether you do what the spirits say, or Ifa says, or Ocha says, or you can go down the line. You gotta almost put that into perspective. So you don't think Eshu's not watching that? And then we wonder, oh, things are not manifesting, or maybe they do manifest. Because sometimes, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. You heard the old saying. You know what I mean? These are the lessons that need to be learned, and people need to learn lessons, and everybody learns lessons differently. It's not just one size fits all, learn a lesson. No, Eshu knows. Eshu knows. All right, so, you know, there is and I don't want to go into a psychological lesson here, but everybody kind of knows there's a famous philosopher that's called Aristotle, right? And Aristotle would teach something. That was the Nico ethics. Nico was Nicomachean or Nico Machi. I can't remember. But we call it the Nico ethics. But it taught that virtue. It taught virtue is a balance, right? It taught that you cannot necessarily be a fanatic in one thing, right, and imbalance your life with the other, right? Everything had to have some form of core balance to it, right? And when you look at it, even the philosophers, right, like Aristotle and his thought process of ethics and virtue as a balance, Eshu embodies that principle. Eshu is actually very much tied into all these famous philosophers. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the science and the psychology of some of these things. But you begin to kind of see, right, where Eshu takes us. So now let's look at it from a moral perspective. So personal conscience, right? Eshu, right, is the external conscience, right? External. Now, Eshu lives with us, right? We believe Eshu's always with us. Eshu came down with us, right? After we received our destiny and we absorbed it and we came down, we took this journey. We came down with our guardian Orisha, we came down with our Eshu. Ori was well equipped into a body, and boom, here we go, right? Eshu's here. Ipaku. And now, let's kind of dissect some of this pataki again, right? The arrogant man in the story ignored conscience. And Eshu, right? Eshu's correction forced the growth. Only when the arrogant man fell did he begin to understand, right? Not necessarily, a forced growth like, oh my gosh, I'm never going to do that again. And you slap a kid in the hand. No. But he taught a lesson to a man that will now forever have and hold ethics and remember that sacrificing is not just about himself, but it's about the greater good and the balance in his life and the life of others. So the arrogant man learned a strong lesson. This is the reason why I say it's no cookie cutter approach here. What about the other one? That lies were exposed, right? In Ogunda Bede, right? Ogunda Bede, she was already telling us, listen, man, I ain't got time for these lies. I don't got time for this nonsense, and I will correct. I will correct. He forces society to honor truth. Okay, so now there's a famous psychologist, right? That last name is Kohlberg, right? That moral stages, right? Moral stages of humans. So when you think about a child and you think how a child grows up and how it's nurtured, right? And then the conflict sometimes with nature. I grew up in the hood. I'm a project baby. I grew up, you know what I mean? There was a time in my life where it was homeless, right? And when you begin to look at these concepts, right, the moral stages show human maturity, right? From fear, right, of nature with the nurturing of principles, right? And Eshu begins to accelerate this maturity through your conscience, through your conscience, yes, but also the consequences in order for you to learn the lessons that need to be learned. And that is very important for us to remember. And we gotta stick to that. This is another role of Eshu. All right. Now, let's talk about the legalities of things. All right. So, I'm an Afro-Cuban Babalao. I grew up, in the streets of Newark, New Jersey, and I lived a lot of times in the boroughs of New York. But, life teaches you a lot of lessons, right? And you learn some street smarts and you got some book smarts. I like to take advantage of both of them where I can. Right? But the legality of things makes me laugh because within our culture, we used to always say, oh, you're a child of Elewa. Therefore, this is the reason why you're like this. You're a child of Ogun. Therefore, this is the reason you're like this. Oh, you're a child of Chango. Therefore, and I always warn people, and I'm not even gonna say I warned them when I was young, because when I was younger, I was just as arrogant and I was just as immature as people would be at that age. I grew up in this faith, at a very young age. But as I grew older, And I became about Allah and started digging in a little bit more on issue and trying to understand who's the issue, you know what I mean? And very rightfully so, who is El Egua, right? Because again, two coins, the two sides of the same coin, right? So when you begin to put these things into play, we understand that Eshu is kind of this cosmic enforcer of divine law. And Eshu, because Eshu was present when Olodumare created the universe, there's a lot to be told here, right? Because as everything is animating itself, and God creates light and creates life into the humans, into the clay, etc., right? And you start to kind of see this thing play out. Eshu's present. Eshu understands what this grand plan is. Eshu understands what is truly the balance of the universe. Eshu understands the cosmos, and Eshu's kind of there, right? So who else would be best suited to be the cosmic enforcer, right? We understand Orunmila as the Elerepin, the witness to creation, understanding of destiny, the reconstructor of destiny, wisdom, right? Divination, in many extents. So we understand that these two are very much partners in this reality that we have to kind of get to a place, right, where people are ethical, moral, and legal. So then we kind of look at it again. Let's look at Agunda Bede. We look at that story that we just talked about. All right, Agunda Bede, truth was upheld as law. Lies were condemned. Why? Because lies would never fit the grand architecture of what Olodumare has said. Simple. Right? So truth was upheld. Right? But truth, or lies was given an out. It said that, hey, you know what? Does have a place in this world. It will only last a short time, and the truth will always come out, and I will make sure that the lie fails. But lies need to have a place, because how else do you evolutionize, right? Humans. How do we evolve? How do we begin to kind of see? How do we weed out the good, the bad, and learn the lessons that we need so that we can evolve? So in Ogunda Bede, we begin to see that. And then in Osatura, right, Eshu enforced the man's, spoken contract. The man said, if I get rich, I'm coming back. I'm doing my sacrifices. I'm doing what I got to do. How many times do you feel people in this world or in this faith always say the same thing? Ah, Padrino, help me. Ah, Madrina, help me. Oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. And then the priest and the priestesses bend over backwards. And I'm not saying all of them. I'm not saying we're all great and we're all, but I'm just saying, how many times does that happen? You know what I mean? Maybe they don't charge you what they need to charge you, and they take a loss because they had to buy the animals, they had to put some ingredients. You didn't have money now. You know what I mean? And then for what? For you to be like, okay, things are working out great, and they never hear from you again. Right. So we gotta be careful. We gotta be careful because those things are being watched, not necessarily because the Babalao took a loss, or the Santero, the Santera, or better yet, Olorisha, or Babalocha, Yalocha. Um, but we had to remember that because here's the thing. There was a theorist, right, that's called Rawls. And Rawls' theory of justice, right, says this: fairness is always going to be the foundation of society, right? So when I start to hear, and when I start to hear, again, I already mentioned a psychologist, I already mentioned a theorist, I already mentioned a philosopher, and you begin to kind of see that, Eshu also ensures fairness, right, in spirit and in society. So we begin to reinforce again what is the purpose of this session, or was the purpose on how we want to end this 4 sessions for this unit, right? Our last session, right? But better understanding. So now let's really dig in. Let's dig in. So let's look at the human health aspect of this, right? And this is not me. Okay, I want to make sure we understand this. You know, McEwen, and if you guys want references, I'll give you references, right? Look at the studies of McEwen, right? Which is a scientist that started to talk about, yeah, he was a doctor that was more of a cardiologist than anything else, but began to kind of understand different things of the heart, how the heart works, right? We talk about Skinner, who was a psychologist, a behavioral health psychologist. We talk a lot about Seligman, right? Seligman was a person that was also a psychiatrist in the mental health field. I don't know if there was a certain concentration. And then, if you guys never heard of Sigmund and Freud, right? Again, we start talking about the higher level of thinking and the mental capacity of people. And Sigmund and Freud were really good at this. So I want to kind of touch on this from a psychological point and a medicine point. So science confirms, right, Ifa's truth. Everything that I said today, Ifa confirms all of them. But patakís, I gave you oduns that from in what patakís, and I'm telling you about Eshu. In the last 3 sessions, we went in deep into different type of oduns. So Sigmund and Freud, right? They talk about something called the super ego, right? In inner consciousness. And that super ego is something that's too much for one person to manage and something too much for community to take. So a lot of times they say that that is something where spiritual people need to kind of think of the something that's higher than themselves. Right. So when somebody has to think of something that's higher than themselves, then I begin to characterize this as the super ego, the person who feels that they're always going to be right, that always has the right of way, that understands what's best for everybody, that wishes they were king for a day. Super ego, right? Is an inner consciousness. Eshu is that cosmic consciousness. This is the reason why I mentioned issue is that thing that absorbs all of that in order to keep us honest, to keep us on track, so that way he can become that policeman of the universe, right? And then Skinner, the psychologist, behavioral psychologist, talks a lot about action, right? And action equals consequences, right? And I'm mentioning these people because I don't want people to be like, oh, I heard it from Oddi Leke. Oh, I heard it because Ifa told me. Because then what do people do? They immediately want to dismiss it. They immediately just like, somebody else. But I'm trying to bring facts. I'm trying to bring Ifa. I'm trying to bring science, and I'm trying to build something that you guys learn, right? And whether you take the word for it, my word for it, or not, irrelevant to me, right? So Eshu enacts this spirituality by testing, by reminding, by allowing people to grow and then fall, right? Understanding that actions equal consequences. What a beautiful thing. We learned that, right? Growing up, you learned that from your parents. Growing up, you learned that from police, from teachers, from people in authority. McElwin, right? Now we get into a whole different thing. This is where health comes in, right? The heart, right? This is the cardiologist. Dishonesty, okay? Dishonesty and stress, they elevate your cortisones, right? This is a problem, right? A lot of people don't understand that the more you lie, the more you stress, the more your adrenaline is rushing to a point that is unhealthy, right? The more you can't necessarily keep track of, what is it that's going on, what's reality, and maybe, you lie so much that you even get twisted with your lies. You know the harm that does to your heart? And that's what this cardiologist was trying to tell us. So do we not think we don't need Eshu for a healthy reason as well, to keep our heart and our ticker right? Right? And then when we talk about Seligman, right? And when I was researching for this session, there's a reason why I have these data points, right? And you go to Dr. Google and you want to talk, you want to hear from certain, Aristotle, famous, great books, great understanding on how society and universe works. You talk about Sigmund and Freud, which were, probably, one of the most controversial, theorists to a certain point. And then I started to kind of dig in and got to these folks. But this one particular person, right, this that I'm about to tell you about, talks a lot about that integrity sustains long-term well-being. Someone who is honest, someone who is able to conquer this, their ability, right, to not have to always constantly be on reactionary mode or anxiety mode or depression mode, or constantly building I guess, a world around them that is ADHD or ADD, right? Because I think, society today, when I was growing up, mental illness wasn't something we talked about and nobody had really anything. I don't know if it's because it wasn't diagnosed or I don't know what it is, but nowadays, and I would tell you, 25, going on 25 years, yeah, 25 years in the military. You know what I mean? And I'm still going. I think I created a certain level of shit, ADHD. You know what I mean? And to where I can't stay still. I gotta keep moving. I gotta stay hyperactive. And then the babalaos that are watching this are gonna be like, yeah, because you're Oddi Leke, and that's what you do. But nonetheless, if I mark me right. But it's just that hyperactive activities, right, that we begin to kind of see. And I mention this because if you were able to do it the right way, if you were able to maintain the integrity, if you were able to maintain some form of that sanity, right, by not necessarily skirting unethical, immoral, illegal things, and guess what? Long-term well-being, baby, and we're doing okay. So think about those things, right? So issue enforces integrity, right, for health, but also for destiny. So when you bring it all together, right, we're gonna move past this. Now we're gonna bring it all together, all right? So we can get to some of the juicier parts because I know some of you guys are ready and excited because I'm gonna actually talk about the protocols of speaking to issue. I'm actually gonna talk about some of the key components to issue, right? And I'm gonna share that with you guys so you have an idea. Okay, when I bring it together, issue unites ethics, morals, legality, health, right? So then, why people always hating on issue? He keeps contracts. He exposes lies and he preserves correctness in society. When you turn on the news, how many times you guys see something and you're like, damn, this is crazy? Not about your feelings. I'm not worried about your feelings and politics and everything else that goes with it, but no, the truth is one thing, right? Social order is the next thing. And protecting the society and the community, that all comes into play. Ethics, morals, legalities, and health. Thank you, Eshu. You know what I mean? You gotta get thanks to the man. Come on. All right, now let's go dig a little deeper. Let's dig a little deeper because I think that's important. All right, so now when I start to look at this, right, we talk about protocols. Because how many times do you go to your issue, your elegua, right, for my Ocha folks, right? And we don't truly attend properly, right? And it's important for us to do that. Like for my godchildren, I like to give them paperwork. I like to always give them paperwork because I say, hey, reading is fundamental, one, and two, you can never say I never told you. Maybe that's more of a CYA for me, but just food for thought. I give them paperwork and I say, study, guys, study, guys, study. Right. And remember, it's in this paper. Remember, it's in file 8. Remember, it's in file 9. But anyway, there's protocols. That's the key I want you to understand. This is not superstition, right? But it's discipline and respect in order to get the outcomes that you need. Right. So, let's touch on some of these things, right? We understand that, when it's all said and done, and you know what? Before I even jump in here, I ain't even asked you guys if you had a question on when I closed up that last section we talked about, because there was a lot there. So I apologize. Any questions, comments, concerns there at all? All right. I don't see any questions, no comments, concerns. So let's jump right in. Let's get it in. So now let's talk about the steps, right? The knocking 3 times on the ground to salute issue. Whether you knew this, you didn't know this, that's okay. Don't get upset, don't get frustrated, right? Now you know, right? Knocking the 3 times on the ground actually comes in combination of 2 oduns. One that's called Okana Meiji and another one that's called Oguna Meiji, right? And this is a thing that we do. And those are not the only 2 oduns that speak about it. There are several more that speak about it. But I just want to kind of just give you some of the overarching because in Okana Mei, Fa begins to teach us that Eshu, right, must be greeted first, right, at the ground, right? So then we see why we position Eshu on the ground, why he's probably on a clay plate, and you begin to kind of see that process. Then in Ogunta Meiji, it begins to say that it is reinforced, right? That no ritual can proceed, right, until Eshu is saluted on this earth. All right, for my Lukumí folks, because I find myself sometimes you guys get lost in the sauce with this one. Eshu, the folks that are actually in the class and actually seen session 1, 2, 3, going, this is their fourth, they understand the issues in the thresholds, right? The threshold between this world and the next, Eshu sits there, right? When you are putting things down to service your eguns, because in Ocha, we always like to, say Ikulo Beocha. Yes, we attend the eguns first. But in order to get to the eguns, you have to cross the threshold, the reality between this world and the next. And as we're always hitting Moyumbas and where Eshu's always mentioned, Elewa's always mentioned, we're crossing the threshold from the living to the dead. So Eshu is always represented, right? So we're always giving everything. Eshu is celebrating with us, right? Then you notice, then we go to Elegua or we go to Eshu because we have to ensure that as we're all celebrating together, he needs to have his piece of the pie. Right? So then Ogundamei and Okanamei are beginning to reinforce these things. And because of the sacred number 3, right? Understanding that issue, right? That 3 becomes very significant in many ways. People that study numerology will tell you that's a great number. People, in the Yoruba cosmology, we understand that Olodumare, broke off into 3. Different world religions will say trinities and this, that, and the other. But 3 is a good number. But it's Eshu's number. Right? So then we understand that, hitting the ground, we understand why the ground, we understand why we go to the eagles, we understand why issues first, we understand all of these things. Now I ask you, if you're not attending the eagles, you should always go to issue first. And that's going to be key. And that has to be understood. So then when we go to Okanamei, there's a Yoruba phrase, and I'm not gonna sit here and claim to speak fluent Yoruba. But it goes, Eshu ni kiaki inle atoki Orisha. Nonetheless, I told you. I got this essay, right, from the Odun of Okanamei, but I thought it was interesting because what it translates to is that Eshu must be greeted at the ground before greeting Orisha. And I saw that come out of Okanamei and I said, damn, well, hold on. We got some protocols here. That's something that we have to understand. Not my prayer, right? I didn't necessarily say it, but it comes out of the Odun, right? And I'll put it, and I'm gonna copy and paste this, so that you guys kind of understand what I'm talking about and where I'm getting this from, because I don't want anybody to ever say it was Oddi Leke that said it. Hell no, I ain't say nothing. I am merely giving you the translation and the prayer that I kept here for the sake of you guys having it. So let me make sure I put it all in here. You guys should see it in the chat. Okay, let me make sure I get it here. But this is a prayer that comes out of Okana Meiji. Okay, so now you guys see it. So not me, Okana Meiji. Hopefully we're all tracking. Okay, so now we look at Ogunda Meiji. Right? Ogunda Meiji was also the sign, right, that says, hey, listen, I'm reinforcing this whole, we gotta, issue and we gotta, needs to be greeted, first at the ground. So then Ogunda Meiji reinforces it and they have their own prayer. And I'll save you guys the torture of me trying to translate Yoruba prayers. Right? I'm very much a memorization person when it comes to the concepts of prayers because my elders taught me the prayers. I learned them. And when we wrote them down, we didn't do a really good job writing them down. So then translating from Yoruba to our broken Yoruba to English, sometimes it's not the strong suit. But the Orishas understand you nonetheless. So that translation is probably more important, right? So in this one, particularly, it says that, hey, we greet Eshu at the earth before we greet the whole world, right? So now you start to go back and you say, well, damn, when I greet the eguns, right? What am I doing? A lot of times I got this stick that I'm pounding. A lot of times I'm taking cascarilla and I'm writing things on the ground. Oh, damn, you know what? I'm actually in my tile of egun that we consecrate. I'm writing oduns on clay that happens to be the same material that was first used to animate humans that comes from the core of the earth to a certain point. There's clay in the earth, right? And you start to think hard, like, damn, wait a minute. And then the threshold of crossing into the spiritual plane, and we're singing and we're pounding and we got the elements. Issue has been with us the whole time, right? And then guess what we do afterwards? Now we're giving him adimus, we're blowing rum on our personal consecrated issues. And it's a beautiful thing. That's Lukumí, baby. That's Lukumí. Gets me excited. My hair stand up. Right. So then we talk about another, you know, Odun, right? And let me go ahead and share that one as well. So you guys have it. So you're not like, damn, Oddi Leke is going crazy. No, Oddi Leke is not going crazy. Oddi Leke is just telling you guys some truth. And whether you guys, are tracking it, not tracking it, that's what it is. Okay. So now let's go even further. Let's go even further. Right. Then we have another translation. Laroye Eshu, right? Barasuabo Elegbara. Now, this is actual one that comes from Lukumi. For my Lukumi brothers. You always hear it say Laroye, Eshu Laroye, Lewa Laroye, right? You hear it say Barasuabo, Barasuabo Elegbara, right? Which stands for Good Morning Eshu, mighty one who protects, owner of power. Ah, very simple. I say it again. Laroye Eshu Obarasu Abo Elegbara. Stands for Good Morning Eshu, mighty one who protects, owner of power. Right, so something for you guys to kind of have, something for you guys to kind of hang on to, because these are all beautiful things to learn. Because again, these are all protocols, all salutations, saying hi. Now you got three different prayers in the back of your pocket, right? Three prayers in the back of your pocket, so that you guys, whenever you want to talk to Eshu again, you know, now you have a protocol. I'm gonna knock three times. I'm gonna tell Eshu a prayer or a salutation. I'm going to tell him who I am, right? And if you have your hand of Ifá, you tell him, Eshu, here I am. John Smith or Johnny Susie Smith, whatever. Ikofani Orunmila or Awofakani Orunmila, whatever my Odung is. And also, I'm Omo Chango. I'm a son of Chango or son of whatever. You about to move on, baby. You about to get it in with him. So now you're getting there. And now you offer him some cool water. With a hikara, you sprinkle some water. You blow some rum on him. Or some gin or whatever that oti is for you. Oti is a drink. Oti is a liquid, a refreshment. Okay? So then when you look at oti, right? And you give him the oti. Or the omitutu, which is the correct way, but don't ever not give him his oti. He needs his oti. Then you present him with that adimu, right? And now the adimu is presented. This is the proper protocol, right? Of how this needs to flow. So now you get the udia, or you get the iya. Iya is the fish, the grounded and smoked fish. Eku is gonna be your grounded and roasted. It's a judia. It's a type of rodent that's grinded that Eshu absolutely loves. You can put cornmeal, always put palm oil, always blow that rum, blow some cigar smoke. Always take care of your Eshu. And then you speak to Eshu like you want to. All right, speak that request clearly. Hey, Eshu, good morning. How you doing? This, that, and the other. Hey, just really wanted just to tell you, please open up my roads for love, prosperity, stability, tranquility. I'm not gonna go to my Eshu to give him any other little nonsense. right? Unless I have to, and then that's a big deal, and I should be probably doing something a little bit stronger with the consultation of a priest and a priestess to make sure I'm doing something right. Um, so then that way I can truly make something out of nothing and reinforce that spirituality and that energy to become something. So just food for thought as you kind of think this through. Okay, then we also gotta, and I guess for this particular part, let me take a pause and let me make sure there's no questions. Do you guys have any questions at all? Okay, good. Very nice. Okay, so now let's talk about some of this. I mean, I told you, man, I went all in to ensure that the curriculum had the proper level of references and aspects of things. All right, so there were two Harvard grads, right, that started to talk about the reduction of stress. They were in the mental health fields, right? And it was called Norton. And let me see if I can quickly, I want to Google this paper because for whatever reason, I didn't write down their full names. And I feel bad not giving that to you because then you guys are going to be like, man, this guy's a phony. I don't want to do that to you guys. Um, okay. So it is loading. All right. So Michael I. Norton, right? And Francesca Gino, okay, from Harvard Business School, talk about rituals for alleviating grievings of loved ones, lovers, lotteries, and they go through this whole thing, right? I don't expect you guys to read this whole thing. That's the reason why you guys have me. But it was a short read. It was just 7 pages. If you guys ever get interested in reading it, I'll actually put the link. I'll actually put the link in here. Let me see how I can. I am going to see how I can. All right, let's see. Boom, share. Okay, I'm gonna copy this link and then I'm gonna share it for everybody who wants it. All right, I'll put it in here in case you guys want it. Okay, so in this link, you'll find the article, 7 pages, very good article. It's nothing too crazy in there, but in those 7 articles, it started to kind of highlight some of the things that knocking, that ritual that we do, the gestures, right? Which is still knocking, blowing rum, laying down, words, the prayers, the salutations reduces stress and it sharpens focus. And when you do this in the daytime or before you're going to do something that is going to be truly impactful in your life, it actually increases, the cognitive skills, the sharpened focus, and it reduces stress. I don't say it. The smart people that went to school for fucking 10 years and have doctorates say it. Right. So this was something that was published, right, in a psychological science, right? Their studies confirmed that those ritual orders anchor the mind. So why would you not do it? If you don't want to do it because hey, you're like this crazy Baba, I'll say it. Don't do it for me, do it for the science. Then when you start talking about knocking 3 times, both cultural and psychological, right? It kind of grounds us. It kind of signals the seriousness of the nature, right? And it contracts us because Eshu likes those contracts, with Eshu as a witness. And that's those things that matter, right? So again, knock 3 times. Laroye Eshu, right? Here I am, right? Or here I am with the hikara water. I'm sprinkling water, right? I put his offering down, I light his candle, and I say, now that the stage is set, Eshu, here I am. Omo Odu Oddi Leke, Omo Chango, right? Offering you this so that you can continue to open up my doors for love, prosperity, stability, tranquility, health. For me, my family, my ile, right? And then boom. As a bawalao, I salute Eshu the way I know how to salute him. I knock 3 times on the floor, but I also go Iburu Eshu, Iboy Eshu, Ibusheshe Eshu, right? And there you go. Something simple, easy, to the point, but very effective, right? All right. Before we jump on to this next one, want to make sure that there is no questions on this particularly. Give it to me, Paul. What you got?
Buddha Boy, Buche Shape, Ardino, Baba
Yeah,
Mike,
bro, boy.
Bendiciones, Ile Brothers. I know we spoke about this before. Uh, so when we tend Eshu, do we have to tend him at the front door? Or can I like take him into my own little, like my private prayer space? You know what I mean? And then put him back when I'm done?
No, absolutely. You absolutely can. So Eshu lives in the thresholds, right? He
Mm-hmm.
thrives in the thresholds, and his essence will always be the thresholds. And we're gonna position him at the door the way we should. But most importantly is understanding that his domain is really everywhere. So if we want to kind of pick Eshu up, and let's say we take him to the river, let's say we take him to the ocean, let's say we
Mm-hmm.
take him, we do these things in a daily. We consecrate little traveling Eshus so
Uh-huh.
that people, don't have to take their big issue. So there's many different ways and concepts, but the answer is yes.
Okay.
Maybe you found a different sacred space, and that's where you want to do it. Beautiful. Eshu's gonna hear you out regardless. That's
Okay.
key. It's the thought, the process, and the heart. Akokan.
Okay. Okay. And we always ask for permission first, right? And let them know our intentions on why we're uh you know, moving them and picking them up and all that, right?
Absolutely, right? You approach Eshu, right? And you're gonna lift them up. Remember what we've always learned. You say Agori. Oh, I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry, Aguleo.
Uh-huh.
Say Aguleo, Eshu, or I go Eshu, you pick them up. You're asking for permission, you're being respectful. Eshu sees that, pum, pum, pum.
Mm-hmm.
When you're ready to go do your thing, you do your thing. You put them down wherever you have them,
Mm-hmm.
right? You're knocking 3 times, you're saluting him, you're pouring water or and blowing some tea, you're giving him
Mm-hmm.
his offering, and you're getting after it. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So those are the things you should do. So now it's perfect. Yeah, you're good to
Right.
go.
All right. Thank
Yes, sir. All right. Got nobody else. We're going to move on. We're going to move on. Okay. So here's the good one. Right? Everybody likes this particular part because everybody likes to always understand the elements of issue. I think we're gonna discuss this a little bit in depth because there's I'm not against icons and I'm not against little statues and I'm not against any of that stuff. I mean, but here's the reality, right? When we try to, the significance of an Eshu altar is that Eshu is present in the altar. Eshu is everywhere. So yes, the essence of Eshu in through facts of the matter, right, is that Eshu is anywhere. But more importantly, Eshu has sacred spaces in nature that have been designated to him by his avatar, which is Elegba, right, which is Elegua, right? And you see the crossroads being a very important concept there. So here's why I say this. If you don't have Eshu consecrated, right, Eshu must be received through consecration by a Babalawo. Babalawo. Okay, that's number one. If you receive an Elegua, which is an avatar of Eshu, Buruboya, that's fine. If you receive your hand of Ifa, but your hand of Ifa, and I just told you earlier, if you I don't know if you caught it, but Orunmila and Eshu have to walk together, right? They are both part of this whole cosmic balance, right? Then you need to receive an issue if you have your hand of Ifa and you don't have an issue. We need to correct that. So there's a lot of different things that I need you guys to kind of make sure that you are mentally prepared to navigate because this faith can sometimes have that complication. Now, a true issue is ritually prepared, right? Goes through a full process. I'm going to show you one, right? This is an unconsecrated issue because I don't like showing consecrated items on social media or anything. But this is an issue right? This is an issue that was mounted, right, for one of my god kids. But inside here, you notice this is a shell, and then you notice that this is a lot of cement. The cement is bulging out, right? Because the things that go inside this issue and the things that go underneath this plate that's also cemented are all secrets. They're all secrets, right? This is not something where we just kind of grab things and we dabble it and we kind of move out. It doesn't work like that, right? So they're herbs, right? There's sacrifices. There's aspects of nature. There's aspects of animals. There's aspects of different type of minerals, different types of rocks, different types of, man, I mean, the list is long, depending on what you're consecrating, which issue you're consecrating. Not an easy feat. So a true issue, now that you know, right, is going to have, right, different elements, right? So then I'm going to bring this back so you guys can understand this. Every issue is going to have a rock. If you guys have not noticed, in this faith, everything is designed with an Orisha, with a rock, right? Everything needs to walk with a rock. The rock is a representation in the devolutionary stages, right, of life, right? So let me explain what I mean by that. Everything starts with a rock, right? The earth is a rock, the core of the earth is a rock. Everything starts with stone. And then as you progress and you move into the organisms of life, you start talking about the plants, you start talking about, and don't get me wrong, the rocks have life in them too. The rocks already have, and a lot of times they're fossilizing animals, fossils, they have minerals. So rocks is a whole different thing. Then the next stage goes to the plants, right? The trees, the seeds, all that good stuff, right? The germinization of things. Then after that, we start talking about the animals, right? And the animals, and you start to kind of see how this all plays out. And then we talk about the humans. It's very important that the rock is present. It's very important that we always have a rock. That's not that's not uh that's not up for debate. It's just simple, right? It's not. Then you see that a lot of times eleguases in Ocha are just a rock. It's one rock. My elegua from Ocha is just a rock, right? And it's a consecrated rock that goes through stages. Eshu goes through multiple stages because as the cosmic enforcer, that's what you're going to see. So you begin to kind of see that the rock is present, but you also understand that in the Elegua pantheon of things, red and black is very much a big deal for the colors of Elegua. We understand that white and black is for the path of Eshu Afra. We start talking about a lot of different paths of Eshu that are like that. So you start to kind of see that, those opposite colors, right? They're opposites that hold the balance. Whether it's red and black, white and black, doesn't matter. You know what I mean? But you need to understand the red and black is Elegua, a pathway of Elegba, and then the white and black is Eshu in many different perspectives, right? And then we start to talk about that when I was talking about the offerings, right? I made mention of the palm oil, I made mention of the hudia, I made mention of the fish, I made mention of the cornmeal, the rum, the cigar, a lot of different things. Those are all standard offerings to issue, right? All standard protocol offerings to issue. Don't forget, right? We're just talking about the protocols and we got to do things right. So, those elements are always going to be very basic for honoring issue. So you need to have those with you. So these are core elements that issue represents, right? These are the type of offerings. Again, judía, pecado, aguado, right? The rum, the palm oil, even honey, right? A cigar, right? There's a lot of different things you could put in there, but those are going to be those basic foundational things that are going to always be important. Okay. Now I want to talk about some of the symbols, some of the reinforcements, right? I also want to kind of talk about some of these items that we see here, right? In these issues, you begin to kind of see here that issue has something that's called an Odierere. Odierere comes from an African gray parrot, right? Or an African gray, I'm sorry, African gray parrot, and the tail feather is red. And this is an amulet. This right here has so many properties and so many things that comes out of the Odun of Obeche that begins to teach us that this particular feather, through a famous pataki that we don't have time necessarily here to talk about it, but this is something that we always got to remember and keep in the back of our minds, is an amulet that repels envy. It's a protective amulet in this faith. Eshu, because of Eshu's cosmic position, right, is one of the keepers of this feather, right, in all its properties. And that's the reason why the Eshus are mounted with this. In addition to the rock, the feather, you begin to kind of see the nail. And a lot of people always say, hey, why is that nail in there? And there's a lot of different patakis that talk about the reinforcements of Eshus and the three blades and etc. But the metal, in a lot of layman terms, when you start to kind of look at it, the metal is Ogun's permanent presence and Ogun's ability to go to war, to establish laws, right? So we begin to kind of see that. You begin to kind of see, like, even in this one, we have a conch shell, and you see that the eyes are the core shells, right? Which talks about commerce, talks about speech, talks a lot about divination, right? It begins to kind of cross those thresholds. You see Orunmila's beads. I don't know if you guys can see Orunmila's beads. I don't know if I can see it, but you guys see Orunmila's beads that are coming over. Those green and yellow beads, when Babalaos mount issues, a lot of times those beads are going to be on there. I'm not going to say one size fits all. A lot of times when you mount one of these issues, this is very lineage based. A lot of fundamental concepts and secrets go into them, but nonetheless, those are just things that maybe in my house, we do and other houses don't. I'm not trying to say that one is right and one is wrong. That's not the intent here. Always follow your lineage and your elders. They know what's best. Right? But together, right, together, through my studies, these elements identify Eshu, right, as the threshold guardian, the messenger, the enforcer of cosmic power and order. So that's going to be important for us to always remember, right? So now you notice how I like to bring everything back down to some form of science or psychology, right? Because I think it's important. Ifá will change the world. Ifá will cure people. Ifá can help this world. But it's important that we do these things. We bring these things together. So Carl Jung was a Swiss, right? Yeah, so from Switzerland, a Swiss psychiatrist. When I saw his name, I said, he's not Swiss. That dude got to be Asian with the last name Jung. But not true. He was a Swiss psychiatrist. And he was the founder of something called analytical, um, oh, yeah, analytical psychology, right? And he used to study under Sigmund and Freud, which, they understand psychology and they were deep into different types of thoughts. But he broke free from Freud. He was actually studying under Freud, right? But he started to emphasize, and this is the reason why he broke from Freud, is that he started to emphasize the spiritual and the symbolic dimensions of the psyche, where the mind and the physical world are not always what it truly seems to be. And there's a connection to something that we truly cannot see. We know there's things going on in our brains when we take brain scans and whatnot, but people can't explain it. And that's a very interesting thing. So the theory, right, using and going off of Carl Jung, right? And again, this is pretty old theory because you're talking about 1875 and he passed away like in 1960, 1959 or 1960, something like that. So you guys look this guy up. That's his last name. First name Carl, C-A-R-L. C-A-R-L. And you look this guy up, man, and he's got some really good things that you should probably look into and read if you like Yoruba cosmology. But here's the theory in short, because it's pretty lengthy. Collective unconsciousness, right? That was the phrase. And the reason why I say this, collective unconsciousness, because it starts to talk about archetypes, right? And for my astrology people and for people who like to talk about archetypes, I had one godchild that was starting to talk to me about archetypes, about warriors and kings and different, and everybody has different archetypes. And he was really good. He would break you down for, I haven't spoken to him for a little bit. Um, but when you look at it in those lenses, you talk about the crossroads, you talk about the stone, you talk about the feathers, you talk about the colors, right? And now you begin to explain archetypes across humanity, right? But now when I bring these archetype tools together or these archetypes together because of what they represent, and I create this thing called issue for you to take home with you. You know what I mean? Now think about it. Think about it. Because here's where Young comes in and he argues. He says, hey, listen, without the ritual, right, and symbol, right, humans lose their link to meaning. And if Eshu means ethics and morals and justice and fairness and truth, then we bring these things together for that collective, mindset. We talk about the stone, that's the permanence, which is the strength, which is the beginning and the core. You talk about the feather, which is the communications and the protection tool. You talk about the iron, right? That's law and strength. You talk about the cowrie shells, that was money and truth, because that's how they used to trade back in the day. Those cowrie shells was money, right? So for Young, the symbols heal the psyche. For Ifa, the symbols anchor the Ache. And then both of them now affirm Eshu's altar, Eshu's well-being, Eshu's consecration, right? As a seat of balance and consciousness in the world, in your life, when you consecrate that Eshu into your life, right? Through a Babalao, obviously, and only a Babalao. So hopefully that all made somewhat sense. Okay. I know that we've been talking for a while, and I apologize. I know when I get on my little rant, it's hard to get me off of it. So now I want to go ahead and just recap, right, some of the things that we talked about so that we can take this lesson. And for those of you that are on Zoom with me, right, you guys remember, right, in Unit 3, right, we discussed a few things. We went over everything issue as a divine messenger. We understood that Eshu is the messenger, the gatekeeper, consciousness. We talked about a lot of the past that Eshu has. Specifically, we talked about Laroye, Alawana. We talked about Odara. We clarified that Eshu is not the devil for the thousandth time. That even though people, man, they drive me cut. Every time I see that, man, it drives me crazy. And then you talk about, we went through that was the first session of Unit 3, so 3 Alpha, 3 Bravo, or 3B, right? The second session we went over the ethics through Oduns. We started to talk about Oyekuni Lobe, that taught, that neglect of sacrifice brings downfall. Eshu enforces balance. We started talking about psychology, the philosophy, and the science that confirms the truth between the ethics of the Oduns. Then we started talking about the misinterpretations that we started to kind of see, where colonial Christians, right, that started the slave trade, distorted Eshu into Satan. And for a lot of those converts, even in Nigeria, began to say the same thing when they started to translate the Bible into Yoruba language, taking the word devil and replacing it with Eshu in order to distort the indigenous faith. And we started to see those things, and those are just facts, right? And you guys started got a sneak peek, and you got a lesson, and you guys saw it. It wasn't me, but you can see the articles and you can read through these things, right? And the media still represents Eshu, you know what I mean, pretty foully, right? And we don't do ourselves any favors, right? Because when we talk about a mystical being like Eshu, that's everywhere and can be used for anything in order to establish some form of balance in our lives. Eshu is intermingled in every faith, down from hoodoo to voodoo to even Christianity, right? They don't even understand how Eshu plays a role in that. But nonetheless, still very much misrepresented, right? So anthropology shows us boundaries, right? Of the deities of this universe, but Eshu alone, was very much demonized, and the colonial and the slave traders, and that was wrong. But here we are. So, what was the teaching point? Eshu was not evil. Eshu's law and conscience, and then we come to this particular, session. So, with that, I want to leave you guys with this: why Eshu matters, right? And I think that is going to be very important for me to end with. Why Eshu matters, right? So, in ritual, no Orisha before Eshu should be honored. Period. Dot. Right? In law, words are contracts and Eshu enforces them. So if I were you, sorry. And if I were you, I will make sure that, you have an idea of what you're saying and how you're saying it, right? In ethics, right? No action is hidden from him. Or just because you're not in front of him, or just because you're not in front of your padrino, or just because, no. You got to be careful with that. In psychology, conscience is your voice. That consciousness or that conscience that you have also manifests itself and can reduce stress and can maintain some good, healthy well-beings. In society, justice survives only because Eshu enforces it. Right. So we always gotta remember these things, right? So if I teach it, Eshu's gotta be saluted, Eshu's gotta be taken care of. With that said, I leave you all with this. Eshu's not chaos, you know what I mean? He's the conscience, he's the law, he's the balance, right? We have to work with him. Again, I'm gonna say this 1,000 times, so ethically, and that's to knock 3 times, salute. You guys heard the protocols, respect the taboos, speak truthfully, begin all rituals with him, accept accountability, for your actions, because actions lead to consequences, right? And remember that everything together, philosophy, psychology, anthropology, medicine, and Ifá all affirm this. They all bring this together for truth and balance, because truth and balance preserve life. Right? So, how will you invite Eshu as a consciousness and a gatekeeper into your daily, choices? So, hey, with that said, Iburu, Iboya, Ibuche everybody in Cyberland. Shapir Baolao, at least I hope so. Omo Odu Oddi Leke, checking out with you. And guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Okay, my Zoom people.